Okay, hello. My name is Andrew Rodriguez. This is my presentation on my artificial intelligence project for Dr. Ko's class. Um, and yeah, so today is December 16th, 2021, and I'll be going over this artificial intelligence project that I made using TensorFlow. And so the name of the project is TensorFlow Flower Image Classifier. So if we go to the next slide, um, to give some background on this project, I gained inspiration heavily from a TensorFlow video, um, which I'll have linked in the description. But the whole gist of the um, video is there were some researchers that went to Tanzania um, and helped villagers kind of detect diseases in a certain type of plant called cassava. And so what they were able to do is they were able to deploy a machine learning model on mobile devices, and they were able to detect diseases that were otherwise kind of hard to detect with the human eye by just using a neural network on a iOS device. And that was achieved by using TensorFlow Lite. And so um, that really inspired me. I thought that I felt like it was really cool what they were doing and that they were actually really helping out, the natives of that country. And I thought it was really cool that, you know, there were some resources online that could help me do a project of uh, similar fashion. And so, um, my second point is that I feel that agriculture was, vital for humanity, and I wanted to learn more about AI and TensorFlow in general, while also probably possibly solving an issue. Um, and another thing is that I believe AI, and technology in general and agriculture have endless positive use cases. So as long as you get creative, I feel like you could um, do a lot of stuff with AI in agriculture. Um, and I should also mention that I was researching this whole project with Dr. Kim and a couple other research students. We were mainly interested in implementing a drone into a smart farm project, but as a small scale, I decided to do a little bit of this research on my own and implement this application that you'll see a little farther down the presentation, just kind of as um, a small stepping stone to get a little more familiarized with machine learning and classification and stuff like that. So yeah, this was a good kind of basis for that. Okay, so in terms of objectives for this project, um, first of all, I wanted to create and deploy a small scale model to a mobile phone. So I kind of wanted to do what that video, the TensorFlow video of those researchers, I wanted to kind of do something similar. I thought it was really powerful that you could deploy something to a mobile device. Mobile devices are pretty frequent um, amongst the world, although not every part of the world has mobile phones. It's pretty common that Androids are really common around the world anywhere. So uh, in the palm of your hands, you could have something that's really powerful, and I thought that was really cool. Um, Second of all, I wanted to relate it somehow to agriculture, going back to the research that Dr. Kim and I were doing, as long as with the research group. We wanted to kind of integrate it into a smart farm project. Um, so that's where I kind of got the idea of doing it with flowers. And third of all, I wanted to familiarize myself with the whole TensorFlow model workflow. So there's kind of artificial intelligence and TensorFlow are like there's so much to it that I felt like I needed to do a couple um, like hands-on projects that got me a little familiarized with it, and that's kind of one of my objectives as well. So if we go to the next slide, um, as far as lessons learned, I would say that um, don't try to cut corners because if you try to cut corners in any of the tutorials or anything of that sort, um, you may get confused, you may miss a step, and you may, end up spending more time that you would have spent if you didn't skip that step. Um, so, second of all, I'd say that tutorials don't always work from beginning to end. Sometimes you need to debug. Sometimes the tutorials expect you to know things that you might not know if you're a complete beginner. Therefore, I would say create a machine learning model is actually fairly simple once you've seen it done. Granted, my example was simple and it's actually there's pretty much a few steps to it. You know, you uh, gather your data set, you create the model, you train the model, and then you kind of predict the model or you use the model to predict and see how accurate it is and so on. Obviously, there's more steps in between, and I might have skipped a couple, but like at a high level, those are like the steps that stood out to me. And these tutorials can be tweaked to serve different purposes. So whatever tutorial you find online doesn't mean that you have to follow exactly what they're doing. You may be able to pick bits and pieces from other tutorials and pull them together and do whatever you want to do with the tutorial. So that was another lesson that I learned. So as far as challenges, at first building, training, and downloading the model were a little bit intimidating. Um, but the instructions seemed to be a little bit vague, but maybe it was just that there was a lot of content in the Google Colab notebook. So, um, but it was actually not that bad. It was pretty well documented, and I was able to just kind of take it a step at a time and understand everything that was going on. Um, yeah, so um, I was able to, use Google Colab to install dependencies, download the Flower dataset, load the dataset, um, create the model, evaluate the model, and finally export it to a TF Lite file, which I then used in an Android app. Another challenge is that I fell into a problem with Android app Gradle files. So I, f- I spent a lot of time on this, and it was just a simple mistake that um, I was I had a I think I was using the wrong Android version, so I had to re-download it. But then I still was getting a Gradle file issue, so I ended up just kind of doing some Googling and found a Geeks for Geeks documentation page that kind of explained how to get around this Android SDK package um, error. And so, as I said before in the lessons learned, that you know, I had most of the times in these tutorials, like you're not going to get through it without any problems, and so I had to do a little bit debugging. Um, as far as the project explanation slash like method of execution, um, for the explanation, um, I started off by following this tutorial that I have linked here, which I'll also have linked in the video description. Um, so basically, um, the tutorial had me start off by um, going into a Google Colab book, which is basically the equivalent of a Jupyter notebook, but it's Google's version. So it's a piece of software that lets you run specific pieces of code in cells, and it's pretty popular in like the data science and artificial intelligence kind of community. But I was able to use Google Colab to download the dependencies for the libraries, like the TensorFlow Lite libraries. I was able to download those and a couple of other things, and I was able to download the data set as well, which was a zip file of just basically like thousands of pictures of flowers, and those flowers were tulips, sunflowers, roses, dandelions, and daisies. So that was the data set. It was just a bunch of pictures. And so we were able to download the dependencies, the data set, and then next I was able to the Colab book was set out to you just had to run the cells, but the next step was that I was able to create the model and train the model with the data set. Um, and next, I was able to export that data set or export the model, the trained model, into a TF-Lite file, which was basically the model exported. And I was able to import that into an Android Studio project and implement that into an Android app. And after doing a couple more additions to the Android app, I was able to um, test the app on my own phone because I have an Android. I was able to plug it into my laptop and run the app on my phone and test the app via my phone with real flowers that I went in person to stores to test it out. And I I also saw some or also did some testing on just pictures on Google because I wasn't able to find all of the flowers in certain stores. But yeah, so that's kind of the explanation. I glossed over it pretty fast, but this tutorial kind of goes over it too, and I think the once you see the video demonstration, it should make a little more sense. This is Andrew. I'm testing out the flower classifier in person in a store, so sorry about the background noise, but this is for Dr. Ko's artificial intelligence class. So if I cover the camera, this is the dandelion, because it's probably been trained with dandelions for the most, but you see if I put it on some roses, the prediction says that it's hovering around 95, 97%, and the topmost prediction is for roses, the second one is tulips, and the third one is daisies. As you can see, it's pretty accurate that it's thinking that they're roses, and they are roses. Here are some other colored roses. Here are some more colored roses as well. And if we go over here, we can test out sunflowers and see the prediction changes as well. Again, so my name is Andrew. I'm just testing out my flower classifier that I built off of a Google tutorial. So, yeah, in the store I was able to find roses and sunflowers, but I didn't find tulips or dandelions or daisies, but I happen to have tulips at my house. So here's a picture of a tulip, or this is an actual tulip in person. I'm actually able to grab it. As you see, the prediction, the topmost prediction is saying that it's a tulip, um, hovering around 90%. And it says the secondary prediction is roses, and the third prediction is daisies. And if we go back to Google, we can just search a picture of tulips. These are obviously just a digital picture, but it's still pretty positive that those are tulips. And if we go to dandelion, or sunflowers actually, let's open a picture of sunflowers. It actually gets a little confused. Seems like it's getting a little confused between dandelions and sunflowers, although they are pretty similar. I think, here we go. This one's a little more accurate, saying this one's sunflowers, probably because of the petals, the characteristics of the petals. And here's a picture of a dandelion. Let's see if it changes. So it loads. Oh, this is actually, this is a dandelion, but it's saying it's a daisy. So let's see if we can get a better picture. There we go. So we switched to a better picture. Now it's saying that this is a dandelion. Obviously, the model has been trained with certain characteristics of pictures. So, you know, if you want a better model, you probably want to have better pictures and kind of know what they're going to... If it's getting trained on a certain type of pictures, then it's going to be good at those pictures, you know. So, and finally, here's the daisy. And if you see, when we switch between the dandelion, it's swapped the top percentage, the top prediction from dandelion to daisy. And yeah, so that kind of concludes the prediction. I wasn't able to find the daisies or dandelions in person, or even the tulips, but I happen to have some tulips at my house, so as you can see, the prediction working as well. So yeah, that pretty much concludes the demonstration.
the real life demonstration of my project, and hopefully this kind of makes sense on um, how it works and basically what its purpose can be. But to keep in mind, these can be repurposed. So this model could be trained with a totally different data set and serve different purposes. So yeah, um, yeah. Thank you.
Okay, so some use cases slash user stories. So yeah, I just got a little creative with these use cases, but I could see that there would be a situation that maybe people who study plants or like a botanist, they could let's say that they were tasked with identifying flowers in the wild. Well, um, if they had, as long as they had a mobile device, they don't need internet connection. They just need a mobile device, and they just need to have the app downloaded onto their phone. Um, then they could use this app to kind of help them identify with more confidence, the flowers, or it doesn't have to be flowers, but the model just has to be trained with that certain um, image that it's going to be classifying because it's not accurate obviously if you train it with flowers but then you go try to identify trees, right? So it has to be the model has to be trained with what it's going to try to identify. So yeah, one of the use cases is I can see like a botanist using this to maybe help identify plants with more confidence. um, Second of all, I can see this is kind of a funny situation, but I can see that people could use it to buy flowers for their significant others. I I know that in my situation, there are some significant others that really have a favorite flower. And sometimes when you go into the grocery store or any store where you buy your flowers, it's pretty intimidating when you walk into the floral department. I find that I get a little confused and I don't know all of the flower types by hand. Um, and so um, using this app could help you kind of pick out that right flower that you're looking for that your significant other may, um, you know, be their favorite. Um, and then another situation are that people who are generally not familiar with flowers may use this. So um, to give a story, I used to work at a grocery store, and frequently I was asked to grab a customer a certain flower type, and I was often confused because I never really dealt with flowers very much. And so I would kind of spend a lot of time going back there and maybe would have to ask people for help, and I thought it was a little embarrassing. But yeah, this app could, help people who are generally not familiar with flowers kind of identify which flower they're looking for, or which flower they were told to get. So um, yeah, so um, all of these scenarios that I thought of kind of have to do with image classification. And I mean, it's expected because this whole project is kind of surrounded amongst image classification. But as I said earlier, um, this kind of model is pre-trained for flower data set. So, and it's kind of only trained for 5 different types of flowers. So if you were to get a little more creative, you could expand that data set to, hold maybe 100 types of flowers. It would just take more work to compile that data set. But in that way, it would be a little more useful than just identifying 5 certain types of flowers with confidence. Um, but you could retrain this whole model with a different data set and produce different use cases. So you could train it with pictures of trees, and maybe someone who's interested in identifying trees could um, use the app to do that. Um, so you just have to get creative, and you could change up the whole project for your own use case. Yeah, so that's the end of it. So here are my references that I use. So on the top is the link to the um, Google tutorial that I followed. The second link to that is the link to the GitHub page for the Android repository that I pulled down and used to help build my app. And the rest of these are just pictures that I used in the presentation. So Yeah, I just added these references just to say that I use them in my presentation. But yeah, I believe that's it. Thank you for listening to me. And if you have any questions, feel free to let me know. Um, my my email is a Rodriguez 139 at csustan.edu. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me at that email. Yeah, thank you.